right. I am very excited about this week and next as we finish up this series. I've had a lot of fun going through this. It's been, for me, it's been a really neat series because I've heard the 23rd Psalm for my whole life, and yet I've studied the Bible pretty deeply for 2 decades plus. And yet within that, there was a lot that I didn't really understand about what was happening in the 23rd Psalm. I think in many ways, by no fault of anyone's, but the 23rd Psalm has been almost reduced in some ways to just a very small part of what it is. And so this has been fun for me to go through, and I hope it has been for you too. If you haven't been here, or maybe you have, either way, I want to get us caught up. I want to read through the 23rd Psalm because this whole series is just working through that section of verses. The 23rd Psalm is fairly short, but it is so impactful. And so I want to get us caught up. I want to read the 23rd Psalm up to where we are today. All right, so here we go. Psalm 23, starting in verse 1, says this: "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." It's a beautiful little section of poetry. But today may be the best part of all of it. And if I'm being honest, I never in my entire life would have thought that the end of the psalm would have been where I landed as the best part. Because for as long as I've known this psalm, I've liked the first part. I like the green pastures and the still waters. I love that image. But man, today I think is going to be really, really good because of what's happening under the hood. And to get to that, I got to tell you a little story. When I was 15 or 16, somewhere in that ballpark, the youth group that I was a part of, we went down to Hocking Hills for an evening. And we went down there because I was a part of the Church of the Nazarene. We were broken up into these districts. And so our district was having a thing down there. So we went down early, and the plan was that we were going to go and just hike around Hocking Hills a little bit, and then we were going to gather back up, and then we were going to go to this meeting that we were having, or this service that we were having. So we get there, we get down there, everything's good. We get out, we go hiking. I love hiking, I love exploring. I don't do it hardly at all, but I really enjoy it. I love seeing different things, seeing new things. I like being in nature. So I take off with a couple buddies, and we're hiking through the woods and on these trails. And then we saw this area that looked really neat kind of off to the right. And we saw what appeared to be a trail, but a little bit overgrown. And we're like, well, that's no big deal. We'll head down that way, and we'll start, we'll head down there, kind of check it out, and we'll just make our way back. So we start going down this trail, and the further down this trail we get, the less and less clear the trail becomes. And the whole time in our, very brilliant 15, 16-year-old brains, we're going, well, the trail's right there. We can get back. Well, the trail's right there. We can get back. The trail's right there. Now, the problem is, as we're walking this direction. I'd like to think that we were super wise, and every 10 feet or so we turned around to make sure we could still see the trail. But that's not the way 16-year-olds work. So instead, we just kept going. We're like, the trail's back there. We'll find it. The trail's back there. The trail's back there. Until we turned around to try to find the trail, and it was gone. Gone. No idea where it was at all. Zero, zilch, nada. So this is myself and 2 of my friends, and to be as clear as I can be about my buddies at that point in time in my youth group, they to this day are probably some of the dumbest people I've ever known in my life. All right? Just idiots. It's why I loved them. I'm a first child. Although I am a boundary pusher, I am not by default a rule breaker. At least not in ways that are big. They would do anything. So I liked hanging out with them because they do all kind of stupid stuff, and I could egg them on to do it, and they would do it, and I'd get to laugh but not get in trouble for the thing, That was our dynamic. So no, they were awesome guys, but they were kind of idiots. And so we're I'm in the woods with these 2 guys who at this point are not going to be any help finding our way back. All I can think about is, Well, this is kind of a big deal. We're lost in a wilderness area. My mom is probably going to murder me when she hears about this, if she hears about this. Because, we may not make it home. Now, I'm not a worrier at all by nature, zero, all right? So as I'm like, all right, it's we're going to find our way back. It's not a big deal. We're walking. We're trying to find the trail. We cannot find the trail. 10 minutes turns into 20 to 30 to 40 to 50. I mean, nothing. No clue where we are. And at the time, I'm cognizant of the fact that this is not good. Now, as an adult who has children that are not that much younger than I was when this happened, I'm way more cognizant of this is bad, right? So we're walking, and it's an hour and a half, nothing, no clue where we are, no signs of civilization, of humans, of trails, of anything. Finally, we start to hear this sound, and we're like, that's cars, on pavement, on a road. And so we start making our way toward the road. We kind of make our way out of the woods, and we're on not an interstate, but a highway, a state route, okay? We're on the side of a state route somewhere in the Logan-ish area. I'm like, thank God, we found a road. I don't know where that road goes, but there's humans on the road. So we start walking down the road. 3 teenagers just walking down the road. No big deal. Some cars go by. We're like, should we hitchhike? Probably not. Let's at least see where this goes first. So we don't. Well, then all at once, all at once, after about 5 minutes of walking on the road, we see this red church van crest the hill. And it's our youth group. Our entire youth group out hunting for us, okay? Now, this is I had a cell phone at this point in my life, but we're in the middle of Hocking Hills, right? This is I've got a flip phone, you remember the flip phone that had the blue buttons? It was, instead of the green buttons, it was the cool blue button version of the green button phone. So it doesn't work in Hocking Hills. It probably doesn't work in Hocking Hills today. So there's no way to communicate, no nothing. The van crests the hill, and we're all like, yeah! Because nobody had a van that looked like that van. So our youth pastor picks us up. I don't have a clue on earth what he said to us. I imagine that it was firm and corrective, as it should have been. I don't know. I was just excited they found us. So we're filthy. We're supposed to go to this service. So we go to a car wash to shower. On my life. We go to this car wash. We park it. We get cleaned up, whatever. I have also no memory of what my parents said to me regarding any of this. Being now a former youth pastor, I can't imagine what I would have said to my parents had I been in that position. But here's the thing. This whole situation, again, I'm not a person that gets scared, but it was terrifying. Legitimately terrifying. Because we had no hope, we had no solution, we had no path, we had nowhere that we could go whatsoever. And that fear that I had that day and that my buddies had that day, it's a fear that runs directly parallel to a fear that in the last 20 years of pastoral ministry that I've done, I think is one of the most kind of primal and deep fears that many, 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 many people have in their faith. And the fear is something that at this point in the psalm that we've read, the Lord is my shepherd, all these, it's a fear that at this point in the psalm I think is pretty significant because it's great, it's wonderful, it's awesome that we read all these things. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me to all these great places. He's with me in the valley of the shadow of death, and so I fear no evil, and he anoints my head with oil, prepares a table, but what happens when I get on the wrong path? But what happens when I walk away a little bit? But what happens when I wander away from him? Because if you follow Jesus for any period of time at all, you have found yourself in spots where you're walking and you're walking and you're walking, and then you look back and go, I don't know where I am. But I know I'm not anywhere close to God. I know he's a million miles away. I don't know how to get back to him, so what do I do? And in that moment, even for people with deep, deep faith, the first moment you experience it can be jarring. And for a lot of people in my experience, again, working with a lot of people over many, many years and experiencing this in my own life, for a lot of people, we sometimes can spend years living in this deep, deep fear. When I walk away from God, is he just going to keep on leading the rest of the sheep and go, well, forget you, man. I was leading you, you were following, and you just decided to do your own thing, so not waiting around for you. And we can cognitively know maybe the truth of what the Bible says about this, yet in the moment when we find ourselves somewhere out in the middle of nowhere without any kind of a path back, it doesn't mean that fear hits us any less hard. And so the question is, what does the Good Shepherd do when the sheep wander off the path? What does the Good Shepherd do? If I mess up enough, will God pull me back? If I drift far enough, will he stop coming after me? Is there a point where he just lets me go? See, most of us don't live, many of us maybe, don't live with true, deep, abiding confidence that God is there, that he's not going anywhere. We instead live with quiet fear that we might lose him. We don't just struggle with sin, we struggle with the fear that our sin might push God away. Now, verse 6 of Psalm 23 deals with this in a really powerful way. It tells us what is true. It answers the question, what happens when the sheep wander from the path? Because they always do. So let's read that verse together. I'm going to read the first part of it. I'm going to save the second part. You'll see why in a moment. Psalm 23, verse 6 says this: surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Now, we need to slow way down here because this little snippet of text is enormous. This tiny little snippet of a poem written 3,000 years ago is massive. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Now, if you are a note taker, I want you to either circle if you have your Bible open or write down 3 words that are in that sentence. Follow, goodness, mercy. Follow, goodness, mercy. And the reason I want you to do those 3 words is because we run into a problem with our English translations here. Now, if you are not aware, I think probably most of us are, but if you're not aware, the Old Testament of the Bible, which is where the Psalms are located, was written mostly in ancient Hebrew and a little bit in the New Testament. Then there's some Aramaic, but primarily Greek. Okay? What that means is that every single word you read in your Bible has been translated from an ancient language. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way it is. That's the way it must be. But this is why there are so many different translations of the Bible. Because within each translation, the translators have made their own best efforts to accurately translate the text into English. Okay? But sometimes when they do, there are nuances of meaning that get left behind. Not on purpose, but that's just the way language works. Have you ever... I don't know if any of you speak a second language fluently, but for those who do, like, you understand this very intuitively. Words don't line up one-to-one. Some words convey a specific meaning in the one language that it's really hard to convey that meaning in another. Which is why, like, if you've ever encountered a scenario where maybe you don't speak another language, but you hear a translator, and maybe somebody says something in one language, and then the translator translates it, sometimes it's like, what are you saying? Because they talked for about 15 seconds and you're going on for about 45. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. It's always kind of cracked me up. But the reason is it's just words, ideas, and thoughts. It's not always one-to-one. And so what that means is sometimes we have to slow way down and go, what's happening here? Because there's more under the hood than what we understand. This is one of those passages. Goodness, mercy, follow. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk you through these 3 words. I'm going to try to avoid this getting academic, all right? But I want to walk you through these 3 words and show you why they matter so much. The first word is the only word that's going to show up on here because I didn't want it to feel like class. But the first word is follow. This is the word radav in Hebrew. The word is translated follow in the ESV translation of this passage. And it's commonly translated follow in other translations as well. But here's the thing. When I think of following, when you think of following, my guess is you think of something that's fairly passive in nature. To follow is like, well, that person's leading, I'm just going to kind of wherever they go, right? That's what following looks like. That's not actually what radav means. This is a very curious translation to me. The word radav in Hebrew meant to pursue, to chase, to make linear motion with considerable effort and focus. Follow is a fascinating translation because to me it doesn't really match that. To pursue, to chase. This is aggressive. This is an aggressive word linguistically. Not a passive word, it's an aggressive word. In other words, the shepherd doesn't just kind of like follow along. Well, goodness and mercy is just kind of tagging along with us. No, what this word means is that the shepherd's goodness and mercy chases us, hunts us down, runs after us in hot pursuit, which shifts the meaning of this just a little bit, my guess would be. It certainly did for me as I began to explore this. Now, I've got some really cool Bible study tools, and to be honest, the reason that this stuck out to me is because early in the passage, it talks about the shepherd leading us. And now in the passage, it talks about the shepherd's goodness and mercy following us. And I didn't understand that, so I wanted to get a better idea of what's happening here under the surface. And so I did this word study, and this is what I uncovered. This is aggressive language. The shepherd doesn't just follow us, he chases us, he hunts us down. And this reminds me very distinctly of a parable that Jesus tells in the New Testament in the book of Luke. It's a parable many of us are probably familiar with. It's in Luke chapter 15, found in verses 3 through 7. And Jesus says this parable, and in verse 4 he says, suppose one of you has 100 sheep. Well, that's interesting. Jesus is using the same imagery. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after and pursue and chase down the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and he goes home because he's thinking the dumb sheep's going to run away again. Then he calls his friends and his neighbors together and throws a party and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. I tell you that in that same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. He leaves the 99. And he doesn't go follow the one in this kind of passive like, ho-hum, No, he chases the one down. He pursues it until he finds it. He doesn't give up. He keeps going. It's a perfect mirror, and I do not know this for sure, but based on the way that I know the Bible works, I have to imagine that Jesus was drawing from the Good Shepherd imagery when he spoke this parable. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. I don't want you to have in mind the image of a passive follower. I want you to have in mind the image of an aggressive shepherd who is hunting down the one lost sheep, not because he's angry, but because he's good and he's merciful. Which brings us to our other two words, goodness and mercy. We just sang the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after me. What does that mean? What does it mean for goodness to run after us? What is goodness? What is mercy in this context? Well, to understand that, it's important to understand this dynamic that I mentioned a moment ago. Early in the psalm, David says the good shepherd leads us. Now, David says the shepherd follows us, and that would be weird except for this reality where we walk away. And in fact, the prophet Isaiah says it this way. This is reiterated in many places throughout the Bible, but Isaiah says this. He says, surely he, and he's speaking prophetically about Jesus one day. He says, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. And this is a fairly famous prophecy about Jesus. We don't typically read on, but what Isaiah says immediately after this is he says, we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. In other words, every single one of us that is here today, every human throughout the course of human history, every one has been a sheep that's gone our own way. Everyone. I don't care how good a person you are. I don't care how hard you try. You're still a sheep that has wandered away. Every last one of us. Because here's the reality. If even one of us wasn't a sheep that had wandered away, then what Jesus endured didn't matter. He didn't need to endure it. Because the reason he took the punishment and the iniquity of us all on his shoulders, Isaiah says it right here. The reason why is because we all are sheep and went our own way. It's why we need Jesus. Because we aren't going to find our way back to the Father without him. I had no way of finding my way back to my youth group, to my youth pastor, none. And in a similar way, no matter how good a person you are, no matter how kind you try to be, we have all failed. We have all fallen short. We have all wandered our own way. And so we need a shepherd who understands that. We need a shepherd who will leave the 99 that he's already found and go hunt for the one that isn't there. We need a shepherd who will chase us down and will pursue us. Straying is not rare, it's universal. So the question isn't if you stray, it's what happens when you stray. And this gets to the why and the how. Why does the shepherd pursue us? And how is it that he pursues us? Those two words that I mentioned. Surely, we're going to return to the Psalm 23. Surely goodness and mercy. They explain the why and the how. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. So let's start with goodness. This is the Hebrew word tov. This is a very common word in the Old Testament, like used hundreds of times, all right? The first time it shows up, if you're familiar with Genesis chapter 1, there's this common refrain in Genesis chapter 1 where God creates something and then he says, and it was good. That word, good, is the word tov. Our word good is weak compared to the Hebrew word tov. Goodness, tov. This talks about how God does this. What tov is about is it means what's truly good, not just what's immediately pleasant. So we think of something being good, we might say, oh, that tastes good, meaning like it tastes immediately pleasant, right? Oh, that was a good experience, meaning that experience was pleasant. It was nice. Tov doesn't really mean that. Tov is deeper. Tov means things that like what is right, beneficial, or fitting according to God's designs, or what forms you into what you are meant to be. It's existential in nature, not experiential. Does that make sense? So when David writes, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, this is talking about that everything that God has determined is truly good for you when he formed you in your mother's womb, that's being actively brought to bear on your life. Like this is deep goodness. This doesn't mean what always feels good, because in God's kingdom, correction often is good. In God's kingdom, conviction is good. In God's kingdom, redirection is good. In God's kingdom, discipline is good. So tov pursuing you means that God will not leave you in what is destroying you, even if pulling you out of it is painful. And that's a whole different thing than what we think about when we think of the word good. I'm going to say that one more time. Tov pursuing you, goodness chasing after you, means God will not leave you in what is destroying you. He will pull you out of it, even if pulling you out of it is painful for you. And now to the second word, mercy. Surely goodness and mercy. The mercy word used here is the Hebrew word hesed. And this word answers the question, why? Why is it that God does this? Surely goodness and mercy. Again, this is an interesting translation. Hesed is another very common Hebrew word, and what it literally means is steadfast, loyal love. kindness, faithfulness, loyalty, especially within a relationship. Loyal love. This makes sense. Loyal love in any relationship pursues the one it loves, doesn't it? As a parent, there's nothing my kids could ever do that would make me love them less. In the moments that I want to hang them out their window by their toes, I don't. I want to, but I don't. There's a steadfast, loyal love that undergirds everything else that happens in our relationship. And what I know is that one day my kids could make the decision to walk away from me, but I'll never walk away from them. In a worst case scenario, if there were boundaries that needed to be established because of unhealth, those boundaries would never be established primarily to self-protect me. They would be established for their good. There is nothing they could ever do to make me love them less. This is the kind of love that is being described. So mercy is an interesting word because there is a mercy element to loyal love. But at the end of the day, what David is saying is surely, your existential good and your loyal love are chasing me. When loyal love chases something, does it ever give up? No. It keeps going. It keeps chasing. It keeps pursuing. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. And so let's pull these ideas together. When a sheep wanders, hesed means the shepherd pursues it. It goes after it, and it goes after it relentlessly, aggressively, no matter what, because the loyal love that is inside the shepherd compels it. And tov means the shepherd brings the sheep back to where it actually thrives, not where it decided it wanted to be, but where it's truly good for the sheep. So hesed finds you, and tov restores you. And this means that God's loyal love is relentlessly committed to bringing about your true good. And God pursues us like that. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life is a wonderful image. But surely the loyal love of God seeking to restore me to exactly what he made me for, with a relentless, committed, unfailing, loyal love, that is a whole different image. But that's exactly what David writes. And so I asked, we experience this tension sometimes in our faith where it's like, well, can I do anything? Like, what's the point at which God's going to be like, well, you've run off and done your own thing and I'm just going ahead? What happens when we wander because we are all sheep who've gone our own way? The answer to that David identifies here is simple. You may wander, but God relentlessly pursues you and he will not leave you where you are. You may wander, but God relentlessly pursues you and he will not leave you where you are. And this is great news. Because often when we wander, we end up in a place we didn't want to be. Often when we wander, at the point at which we realize we've wandered, we look back and go, I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm going to do. And we need someone to chase us down in those moments and find us and pull us back to safety. But there's one more thing that we've got to consider with this. And it's something that we're going to consider in looking back through several snippets of this psalm. There's one more, let's say it's a problem, okay? There's one more problem we've got to deal with. So let's look back through the psalm again, just at some snippets. Psalm 23:2, the second half says, he leads me, the shepherd, he leads me beside quiet waters. Psalm 23:3, he guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Like the shepherd is leading us. Then when we wander, something else happens. Psalm 23:4. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. We talked about this a little bit in week 2. The rod and the staff, which as some of you very keenly noticed is in the graphic. Not on this one, but the main graphic. The goal, the purpose of the shepherd's staff was simple. It served a few different functional purposes, but the shepherd's staff served one main purpose. It was designed and intended to rescue a sheep from danger. That's what it was intended for. If a shepherd got caught, or if a sheep got caught in a thicket, a briar bush, the shepherd would hook that sheep with the hook and he'd pull him out. If a sheep got down onto a ledge somehow near a canyon, a ravine, the shepherd would lift the sheep with the hook. The staff was intended to protect the sheep. The rod was also intended to protect the sheep, but in a different way, and I won't rehash it all, but it was an offensive weapon used to scare away predators. Both were intended to protect the sheep. Well, what does that mean? What it means is that as we follow the shepherd, as he is leading us, we are going to wander off. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to get stuck in a thorn bush. We're going to get stuck on a rocky outcrop by a ravine. We're going to put ourselves in danger. And when we do, the shepherd will try to rescue us. But what if the sheep fights? Makes the shepherd's job a lot harder. What if the sheep goes, I don't want that? And instead of allowing the shepherd to hook him inside the bush, what if he goes deeper? What if the sheep, as he's standing on the rocky outcrop and he sees the hook coming down, what if the sheep goes, nope, I don't want that, and moves further down the ledges? What happens then? Well, we already know what happens then. The shepherd is going to relentlessly pursue us, but we can make his job a whole lot harder. And so often in our lives, that's exactly what we do. Instead of just turning back to the shepherd, we resist the shepherd because we're embarrassed, because we're ashamed, because we don't want to be seen in the thorn bush. We want to get ourselves out of the thorn bush and then just go back to the shepherd and be like, look, see, I'm here. I didn't go anywhere. We get filled with all these things that drive us to resist the one thing we need. The one thing, which is what we see at the end of Psalm 23, verse 6. I told you earlier we were just going to read the beginning and I was going to bring the end back in because the end of Psalm 23, 6 is the end of the journey. It's the end of the psalm and it's the end of the image. And this is what David writes there, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. Surely the goodness of God, surely the loyal love of God will chase after me for my whole life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In other words, in the moments when the shepherd is coming after us with the staff, trying to hook us and pull us back to safety, he's not trying to do that because he's angry, because he wants to shame us, because he wants to embarrass us. He's doing it out of loyal love and mercy and compassion for us. And he's doing it so that he can take us home to a forever home. A home that will never fade, a home that will never fail, a home where his goodness and his mercy are always present. Why? Because that's where the shepherd is. A home where, as the Bible describes it, there will be no more tears, no more sorrow, an eternal home one day that we get a taste of in this life. God is not interested in rescuing us, in saving us from the bush and saving us from the cliff just because he has to. He's interested in that so that we can be with him forever. And David ends the psalm there because that's what any good shepherd would do. The goal of any good shepherd was not just to lead sheep around. The goal of any good shepherd was to take the sheep out to where they could graze and they could drink and they could have health, and to lead them through the hard times and to take them through the valleys of the shadows of death and to fight off the predators and to show them that they're with them, and ultimately to bring them home where there was safety and where there's security and where they could be with the shepherd forever. So what do? Well, we resist the urge, we resist the temptation that as humans we feel to fight the shepherd when he's trying to hook us. And instead we just let the shepherd lead us home. That's it. See, the funny thing about being a sheep is it's not complicated. I've talked some throughout the series about how there's kind of this negative connotation about being a sheep, and in one sense, it makes sense because sheep are kind of dumb. It's not the most positive description. Hey, you're such a sheep. But at the same time, what freedom there is in knowing I don't have to figure it all out. I don't have to do it all on my own. I don't have to make my way out of the thorn bush that I don't even know how I got in the first place. Instead, I can just let my shepherd pull me out, and he will lead me home. So let him. Let the shepherd lead you home. Because home was always the goal for David. Because when we're home, it means we don't live afraid of losing God. Because when we're home, it means we don't collapse out of fear that we will fail him. Because when we're home, we don't try to prove that we're worth his love because we're already in his presence. We can rest. We can have comfort. We can be content because we're with the shepherd. So we're not people trying to hold on to God. We are people being pursued by a God who refuses to let us go.